Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 290. My name is Nbz, and oh boy, that's 300 is actually frighteningly, that seems, it's only 10 episodes away. I do realize that our episodes obviously go out a longer period of time, right? It's like 20 weeks actually, and then when you break that down, that's like multiple months. But I'm like, oh wow, we're actually getting close to...
But even with a break with my podcast paternity leave, we are fast approaching 300 and going to do our top 50 games of all time again.
Yeah. Well, are we going to do that again? Or are we going to do, I don't know, are we going to do a top 100? Who knows? You know, we could shake things up.
We have a think about it.
We'll have a think about it.
And Switch 2 there'll be a good number of Switch 2 games out by that point.
Well, will they? Will the Switch 2 be out by the time 300 happens? I don't actually know. We should math it out at some point. So maybe it comes out around that time, and maybe that's a good thing that we could reflect back on. But yes, we are barreling towards we've already done this for over 10 years. I think after 10 years you stop counting, right? It's like when you hit your 30s, you just stop remembering how old you are.
Start going backwards again.
Yeah, no, that'd be nice. I would like that. But how often do you forget how old you are, Bally? Because I feel like it happens to me regularly.
Quite a lot. And yeah, I'm 33, but I definitely don't feel 33 at all. Even with 2 kids, I'm just like, I think I'm 24.
I think it's the eternal, like, no one actually realizes they're an adult, or like adults actually have no idea what the fuck they're doing. Like the moment you realize when your parents are just like, they're not like these beings who know everything, they're actually just like regular people who just, they're trying
muddling their way through life.
Exactly. No one fucking knows what they're doing. And the sooner you realize that, the much I don't know, I feel like the much easier life becomes, because you just realize everyone has no idea what the fuck they're doing. So
no.
Anyway, very much in that vibe as well. No, my trick, Valley, is to think that I'm older than I am. So, like, I thought I was 33 all of last year, and I turned 33 at the end of last year. So now I've been in the mindset. So now I'm like, oh, I'm 35 now. I just think that now.
I've got an even better trick than that, is go out with someone who's older than you.
No, that's good. That's pretty good.
Caroline, she's a couple of years older than me, so she's 35, I'm 33. And
see, that's nice. You always have a little bit of a buffer zone.
There we go.
So, yeah, that definitely helps. Lovely. Well, here we are in a zone. I played a game with the name Zone in it, accidentally, by the way. I won't talk about it on the show, but yesterday, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii came out, and I started playing that. And as usual in these games, they put old Sega games in there. And I went to, before I saved my game and stuff, I was like, oh, I'll boot one up. And it was Fantasy Zone. And I've played Fantasy Zone previously in, I believe, Judgment or Lost Judgment. I played a little bit of Fantasy Zone. If you don't know, Fantasy Zone is like it's a shmup from the Master System, which was Sega's first console before the Genesis. And the Master System obviously was kind of NES era type of technology. So it's a very kind of like early old school shooter. But it's interesting in that it's like very pink and colorful, and like it's like, I don't know, it's very different aesthetically from any space shooter that exists out there. Anyway, I just started playing it, and I realized there's this rewind thing, which isn't like a traditional rewind. It basically like just jumps you back 5 seconds. And so I just started playing it, and I just kept getting further, and I'm like, surely this game's not that long actually. It's probably like 25-30 minutes with like not save stating but rewinding. And so I just beat a video game inside another video game, and it led me to this conundrum of, how do I log this on Backloggery? Because I didn't play it on another console or a Switch Online service. I played it inside a video game.
Well, that's in the console window, you have to put Pirate Yakuza, or whatever.
Yes. Right. So what I did was I made Pirate Yakuza into a compilation, and then I tagged it as being on Steam, but the sub-platform I tagged as the Master System. So now I have the Master System version of Fantasy Zone tagged inside Pirate Yakuza. So if I ever forget where I played that, I will have no chance finding it on my backlog.
Oh my god!
Because it's going to be
this
buried.
Is why I do the controversial thing of, if I play, say, Super Metroid on the, let's say, Wii U, I don't even put the Wii U. I just say on the Super Nintendo I played Super Metroid. And the downside is I don't get a list of all the consoles I actually played the game on, but it means that as I go through different console life cycles, I will know all the Super Nintendo games I have played all next to each other. So ups and swings and roundabouts. But
yeah, if you're happy just being a liar for your whole life, Valley, that's fine. I mean, I tell the truth, so
your list is so convoluted.
Well, no, here's the fucked up thing, all right? And backlog is just entire backlog chat. But basically, what they did was they used to have a separate thing for download Switch titles and Switch titles, and I very much separated Switch titles that had like a cartridge or were like first party stuff versus download titles on Switch.
Yes.
Sorry. And the new update for Backloggery just completely nuked that shit, and I was very annoyed.
Because everything's going digital anyway.
Yeah, I guess so, but it just really annoyed me. I was just like, that's fucking annoying, because I had it all, so I could look at my indies separately to my like main stuff, so anyway. Yeah. Very, very minutiae here. I'm sure you're all bored to tears, but don't worry, we'll talk about video games soon. Bali, what's today's show going to look like?
For the first segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing, and for the second segment, again, we're going to go to some listener emails.
Yes, indeed. So we've got some fun stuff to get through. So let's kick things off with a video game, a new one from 2025. What do you know? We've been playing some new video games, and this one came out, I want to say, few weeks ago, maybe a month ago at this point. Lonely Mountains Snow Riders. Bali and I have both been playing it. Bali, you're a big fan of the first game. I also played the first game.
Yes.
But this is essentially, to give the pitch, is a downhill skiing game where there's a lot of physics involved and kind of like tight movement and control. I'd almost say it's a racing game in some ways, but very, very pretty looking, kind of isometric perspective, has a very cool aesthetic to it. But Bali, how have you been finding this Lonely Mountain Snow Riders?
I've been really enjoying it. I very much loved Lonely Mountains Downhill, their first game, which was obviously mountain bike downhill based. And that was kind of one of my fondest memories of kind of early owning an Xbox and having Game Pass and be like, I'll just try this game. And it's like, wow, this game is amazing. Are all the Game Pass games like this? This is a ridiculous offer. So I have very fond memories of that game. But then when I found out like Snow Riders was coming, I thought, ooh, that's an interesting direction to take the series, because the bike downhill feels really nice, but then when you think of the possibilities of the physics when it comes to skis and snow and kind of the way that skis can weave, and like this game just feels like a nice level up from that first game, where you really do have such fine controls over the speed, and you can control the speed in multiple ways. Like, for example, by arcing and banking and weaving down the mountain, you will considerably go slower than if you just straighten up and go much faster. So like, I think the best part is the physics and the game feel, but visually it's still a stunning game, and like there are some really nice biomes, the hottest word at the moment, and I think that it's just a phenomenal game that I didn't even realize had multiplayer, and we've been playing a couple nights of that multiplayer, and that, in my mind, just takes it to another level. It's a very, very early game, not game of the year contender necessarily, but like it's a very, 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 very good game that's come out this year already. Yeah,
and I think the thing that for me makes it stand out, and why I think it's going to contend for me as well, is generally with these types of games, I don't know what I would compare it to. I mean, I guess like Ollie Ollie is a little bit of a good comparison point in terms of it's built around a few levels, and those levels have challenges associated with them, mostly to do with how quickly you can get through it, how many times you crash, and a combination of the both. So like, you'll have certain thresholds and certain points to get for doing each level, and obviously they get harder and harder. And there's this nice distinction between the kind of the basic levels, the normal levels, which are the blue slope, and then the harder levels that you can only unlock after you've kind of completed. I think if you've completed 2 of the 3 challenges on a level, then you unlock the black slope. And the black slope is like, okay, same level, but we're going to go down it differently. We're going to have different points of ingress and egress.
I've found you have to beat all 3 on some of them.
It's interesting because I unlocked one having done only 2 of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it seems maybe course dependent potentially as well. But yeah, the black slope is a much harder take on it. And I think the interesting thing is, playing through it once and just finishing the game, I felt like, even though I rolled credits, it's the rare instance where I'm like, no, I want to play more of this. I want to go back to it.
How did you roll credits? Because I feel like I've quote unquote beaten the game but never rolled credits.
Right, so the game won't roll credits for you. There's literally a option in the menu that is it's called Credits Mountain, and you can play it as a level, which is really fun. So
that is cool.
It's I like when games take the credits and do something fun with them. You literally ski down a mountain as you see everyone's name in the credits roll past, which is a very fun thing to do. So yeah, that's basically if you want to, when you're done with it, Bal, you can go on that course and be like, oh, now I'm done with it, basically. So I think the thing that stands out is like the fact that I did want to go back to it even after having finished it, and I was like, what's the best way to get more time out of this? Is like, I did enjoy doing that, but I was like, Bally, should we play some co-op? That might be a good thing to do to try and extend the playtime out from it, and it has been a lot of fun doing that in a few different ways. I think the kind of thing you were talking about when we were playing was, it's not like a traditional racing game, it's a point-to-point racing game.
It's very much like rally driving games I've played. So it's time-based. In a rally game, generally, crashing gives you a big time penalty. In this game, it's kind of like its own separate category of penalty, but ultimately it's point-to-point, and then there are legs within that race. So let's say one route might have 7 checkpoints, and once you've beaten the 7 segments, as it were, you finish the race. But you have to get to a checkpoint in order to, if you die, go back to the last checkpoint. So if you got to bank it. Yeah, you got to bank it, and these checkpoints are clearly marked by lines in the snow, and once you get through those, you're on to the next leg, and so on. And that format in and of itself is awesome, but then you put that format into a multiplayer setting where we are both racing down the same route live, and you can obviously like see each other on each other's screens, and it becomes really, really like exhilarating, because you might be racing side by side. Oh, I crashed, damn it. I really hope Nbz crashes before he reaches the next checkpoint. Yes. And then it's like, oh, he went through the checkpoint. God damn it. And now I'm back to the start of my checkpoint, and he's already on the second leg. And it's that feeling of, right, now I've got to play catch up. So I feel like I start racing a bit more aggressively, and I might make more mistakes, and that just unwinds all the progress I'm making. And it's that kind of push and pull effect that I think point-to-point racing really gives you, that maybe, say, a driving game where you're going around laps is a bit less intense in the traditional sense.
Right, and I always feel like in traditional racing games, I can never compete with you just because you're just better at driving than I am, and I'm never going to have a chance of winning. Like Mario Kart, there's times at which I can get a leg up, and that's because of the balancing with items.
But this time, you challenged me while I was halfway through the game.
Well, yeah, no, of
you
course.
had beaten the game.
That helps, but I also do legitimately think that as a racing game, as a setup, there's a little bit of platforming adjacency, I would say, to this as well. And so I would say I'm actually kind of better at this than I am at regular racing games. The other example you brought up was Excite Truck, right? Where someone can win by doing tricks instead. And there's no winning by doing that here, but there is a nice after race breakdown that says who had the longest jump, who was the fastest, who had the most crashes, basically. Almost every single one I had the most crashes, but there was it was pretty even in terms of who was winning the races. And the nice thing about that is, because of the checkpoint in nature, if you could get stuck, you could get hung up on one section, and if someone's behind you, it gives them the time to catch up, basically. Which I think is really nice. It's like you could be right at the end of a section that's been really challenging, and you die, and your opponent gets in there and somehow does it first time and gets through, and it really just swings the balance, the momentum of the race.
Exactly.
Which is very, very fun.
And it's one of those things where when we started racing, and I said, oh, Nbz, I've not played all these courses, you've played all of them, so surely you have an advantage. And initially we thought, well, yeah, probably, and you were winning some of those earlier races, but the more we played, we realized that because of the quite high skill ceiling on this game, it becomes more about learning how to tackle the routes more so than knowing the routes. Because by the time we were in that third batch of races, and you had done them a little bit, I hadn't done them, the fact that I hadn't done them didn't make a difference, in the sense that we had both reached a certain skill ceiling where we were quite equal, and knowing the route didn't really matter, because what mattered most was our ability to see route in front of us and make judgments and based on that. And that's where the real skill in this game is. It's about reacting to, do I take this route aggressively, or do I really play conservatively? And if I just constantly play conservatively, Nbz is just going to overtake me, and I can't do that. So I've got to, it's that push and pull of I got to push a little bit hard, even though I'm going into this route blind. And I think that's where this game is at its most elegant, is where it's a fine balance of all these things. It's not just I'm really good at driving games, I'm just going to go. Like, it's almost, I guess you compare it to like maybe a point-to-point race in like a Forza Horizon or something, where you're unfamiliar with the track in front of you and you are basically relying on your driving skill to get you through the blind course ahead of you. And that's kind of what the later courses in down Snow Riders feels like. It's like I'm just using my skills and what I've learned previously in this game to get down this mountain as fast as possible, and in some cases take on Nbz and, you know, try and beat him. And I love that feeling. Like, we had some incredible races last night that, as you say, were just down to the wire, and they were. I really like those last batch of races because they're a great combination of quite slow, finicky, almost like you said, platforming, but combined with very fast, long jumps and downhill sections that just are so exhilarating. Like, it was a very, very fun multiplayer experience.
There's nothing more satisfying than like full belting it down a slope and like perfectly nailing the corner and just like not hitting anything and gliding through the checkpoint. You're like, oh my god, I fucking nailed it. Like, you just feel like a god when you do that stuff. It's so incredible. And yeah, I think there's one of the things you're touching on, right, is just like, would I have an advantage by having played it? I think because the courses are so long and there's so many elements to them, it's actually almost impossible to remember what you are doing or what's coming up ahead. There's like one example of it I can think of, which is that one area with the ice stuff where you have to go towards the camera to find the checkpoint.
Yeah, there's a couple of little points like that. It's better to have that knowledge ahead of time. But
yes, yeah, but aside from that, because every level, there's not that many levels, but they are all really long.
But if we just do that race once, you've told me, oh Bally, by the way, on that bit you go towards the camera, then we do it again and we're on an equal footing almost straight away. Like, it's not a big deal.
No, for sure. I also think the feedback is very good in terms of it keeps track of which checkpoint everyone is through, and so you look up and you're like, oh fuck, he's at checkpoint 5, I'm at checkpoint 3. You're like, god fucking damn it. But then like there was
so much Mario Kart swearing at each other.
Yeah, there was, but also like the box will highlight red when the other person crashes, and so you can see when someone just keeps fucking up again and again, which is great because like the person behind is like, uh-oh, they got stuck on this section, time for me to catch up and get there, because they just keep crashing.
It was so satisfying because I feel like you're a little bit more vocal than I am when we do these things. I kind of try to stay silent on purpose, like stay in the zone, gotta win this. And what would happen might be like, so I might be ahead and I go through a checkpoint, and then I just see your screen flash and you go like, god damn it. And then because you've just crashed, it's a good opportunity that you check what checkpoint I'm on, and you see that I'm like maybe a couple ahead, and you're like, so you say god damn it again. It's like just this snowballing effect of like getting more frustrated. I've just that feeling of I've just crashed and the person I'm racing is like 2 checkpoints ahead of me is so frustrating, and you just want to catch up.
Yeah, you're like, oh god, I've lost it all. But then like there's moments of there's a really annoying section that the person gets stuck on, and you're like, okay, finally, this is my chance to catch up. So yeah, it's really, really good. I think from a game feel standpoint, it just feels fantastic to control, you know, like you have a real fine level of control in terms of you hold down a trigger.
And we went for opposite control options as well.
Right, yes. So like the tutorial is brilliant because it just tells you to move in a direction, and so you will naturally move your analog stick on whatever way your brain works, and it sets you to that style of control based on your input. And so it's not asking you, it's not saying like, oh, do you like want to invert your controls? Because like most people don't understand what inverting means and what it means left right inversion, up down inversion. They don't ask you, they just get you to play, and they just assign it to you based on how you play, which I think is super, super smart.
So you like moving the analog stick towards the point you're going, whereas I like to have left and right will always be left and right of my skier no matter where the camera is.
Right, exactly. So like if you're coming towards the screen and your analog stick goes to the left, your character will go to his left, right?
And I feel like my preferred method is kind of the traditional, like I think I played Wave Race on like the Game Boy from like my cousin's Game Boy way back in the day, and that style of like top-down 2D racer traditionally had the whole left-right thing. So I think I'm just used to it. There's some part of my brain that's just used to that weirdly. So that's kind of why I go with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think something we were talking about as well is like you don't really think about it in the moment, but the camera is really brilliant in this game as
Really
well.
impressive.
It constantly is shifting and changing, so your perspective is different. So sometimes it's behind the back and you're going down a slope. Sometimes it's like side on and you're like kind of jumping between platforms, and oftentimes like you're coming towards the camera as well in the kind of Crash Bandicoot style, or just like you're going down a mountain coming towards yourself, and the way that it naturally moves to accommodate, and yet you never really feel confused or like the controls mess up, I think is really, really impressive. And it's one of those things that's almost hidden, and if it was done badly, you would really notice, but it's done so well that you don't even think about it. And yeah, I think it's really impressive. The way they implement it and the way that it works for the game. So yeah, very, very good. But yeah, like I was saying, like you can like hold down the trigger to like get your what do they call them? The things in your hands, your little your things that move you along. I don't remember what they're called in skiing.
Sticks.
Ski. That's it. Skis.
What they're
ski
called.
logs, whatever you call them. You use those to move along. And then if you hold down A, your character goes into like a ducking pose that is like basically like going down a hill. You're going to
Speed up.
get into a aerodynamic stance essentially, so that you can like quickly zoom down a hill. And then like when you go off a jump, you can. This is one of those things we haven't actually done a lot of, which is like the trick stuff. Like there is tricks and moves you can pull off midair, and that stuff's cool. It's in there, but I feel like there's so much to think about when you're doing this that it's hard to...
I've always veered away from tricks in these styles of games, whether it's Wave Race or like Excite Truck, or you know, I've always been like, it's all about the racing, the driving, whatever it is. And yeah, it
just adds another layer to it that isn't really necessary, especially for the races we were doing. I think there's another mode which we kind of bounced off pretty quickly, which was it's like a co-op mode, and it was quite confusing because there were no checkpoints, and you had to like hit a certain score threshold, but if you died, you go back to the very beginning. And I managed to get all the way through without dying, and then I was done, and Bally was just kind of still going, and we had a point threshold to hit. It was just a bit of a weird one. I didn't really understand the point of it.
This was after the high of us having had done a downhill race against each other, and there's like, oh, let's try out this other mode, and it just felt like a very, not say ill thought through mode. It just was nowhere near the thrill of racing for some reason.
And to be fair, I didn't read the instructions properly because I skipped them because I checked it out and then I had to go back, so we couldn't see the instructions again.
Nbz only reads in narrative-driven games. Like
exactly.
Anytime it's not narrative, he's like, why am I reading this?
No, any other words, they don't fucking exist, you know. But I didn't properly read them, and we didn't really actually know what we were supposed to be doing. So maybe we're being harsh on that mode. Maybe it's great, and we just don't know what to do. But it felt to me like that's where you would do tricks, is that mode, because it's a score-based thing.
Okay, yeah.
So I'd imagine that's kind of the purpose there. But anyway, it wasn't as fun, and so we went back to just the regular racing, and that was kind of the best thing about it, generally speaking. So yeah, I put like I think 5.5-6 hours into this at this point, which isn't a huge amount of time, but like
I'm on like 5 hours, and I'm pretty keen to max out every blue slopes, every like of the easier slopes, and then try and do as many black slopes as I can, because it's so damn good, and I want to play a lot more multiplayer with you, Nbz, because that is high octane.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, if you're the type of person who just wants to kind of breeze through it quickly, you can do that very easily. You know, there's not that many levels, so you can see the whole game. But I don't know, it really just did get its hooks in me, and I think it's very, very strong overall. So, really, really thoroughly have enjoyed Lonely Mountain Snow Riders, and we'll continue to dip in and out of it. Yeah, anything else, Bally, that you had that you want to say about it?
I'm interested in where the series goes next. I think a couple of themes that are quite common in video games that they could go. I think one would be like downhill skateboarding in some way. And then the other one I think would be, now this is where I think it would fall apart, would be something water related.
I was thinking that
you can't
like,
do downhill. Like
you almost think like surfing basically, but that's very difficult to do, because that then leans into the more trick-based, point-based stuff.
And then you've got water physics to play into that, which is an whole ball game of itself. But like, there's something when you're weaving in the snow, it feels a lot like Wave Race and like that kind of
Right.
feel. And I think this development team could do something really, really impressive as the next step. I think snow was the perfect stepping stone from like the downhill biking. I will say, like, I think I prefer the biomes of the biking slightly more. There's just something I like more about woods and trees and this kind of thing versus snow-covered areas.
They have a bit more freedom to be different in that sense as well, because naturally you have to have snow in every area for this, so it's all going to look kind of white because that's what snow is.
I feel like because it's snowy, you don't get quite as many birds and calls, and like I feel like you heard rivers more and heard bird calls more, a bit more on the biking one, or
a bit more of the atmosphere around you.
A bit more atmosphere. But equally, I'm not a skier. I'm not a downhill biker either. I do enjoy forests, so maybe I just vibed more with that, I guess. But
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm super interested where they go next, because it's just such a pure form of gaming that is so perfect. Very impressive.
Yeah, one of the biomes could have been that Dubai shopping center that has a sort of slope inside of it.
Jeez.
I don't know. There's ways you could get creative with it, but I think this one definitely is the one I prefer over the original. I think I enjoy the physics of it.
I agree in terms of physics, totally. It just feels amazing.
Yeah, and the sound design's great as well. Just like the sound of the way that you move on the snow. Like, there's a crunchiness and just like a softness to snow that is hard to nail down sometimes. And I think video games are like one of the best ways of simulating snow that exists out there. This nailed it for sure.
I wonder if they thought about snowboards and how they could differentiate that.
I feel like I saw some snowboard stuff in the trailer for this, so
really?
Maybe it's an unlockable somewhere. But so far it looks like we just unlock skis, different types of skis at least. So I don't know. You can play this up to 8 players online as well, by the way. I should mention.
I mean, point-to-point racing with 8 racers would be so cool.
Yeah, very, very fun. So anyway, awesome little game. Very, very glad that we checked it out. Bali, you finished up another new game that came out that we talked about last time.
Yeah, finished up Citizen Sleeper 2. In the end, it took me 18 hours. Took Nbz 12 hours. And
I don't understand.
So,
because I feel like Citizen Sleeper 1, we had around the same playtime.
Well, I've got some theories. So I'm already a slower reader than you. That's clear. I didn't think I was this much a slower reader.
No, 6 extra hours for reading sounds like a lot.
I think what happened was, and this is kind of something that is my fault for the time in life I'm playing this game, but that's kind of just when it came out, is that when you're quite sleep deprived and you've got 2 kids, it's that feeling of like, right, when I'm going to chill with the video game at the end of the day, you kind of don't want to do lots of reading. It's like, time for my reading. And while I was in the first 10, 12 hours of the game, I didn't mind that as much. Like, I felt very on board with the story, all the characters, this kind of thing. Once I was past 12 hours, that feeling of like, right, I'm going to do more reading, it kind of ground me down a little bit. And I think that I would, if I was just in a different phase of life where I was reading faster because I wasn't so sleep deprived, I think I would have had a better time with this game.
Yeah.
I think that it just strung out a little too long, and then there's kind of like narratively things build up, and there's a little bit to do after that build up, and then I felt, oh, for God's sake. And then I had, got I got 2 red notches on my kind of glitch meter, and then one of those miraculously went away later in the game. I don't fully understand how. And then I got another one back, so I was back to 2 for like the final stretch of the game, and then that was a little bit frustrating. And I just
narratively, I think you are forced to get that final one, because I had it given to me at the end as well.
Yeah, I know, I get that, because it kind of just goes on and on and on, and like there's not really an option of avoiding it. But yeah, so I think this is more about me than the game, is what I'm trying to say. Is that I was a little bit down on it by the end. I feel like this game was more about the journey than the resolutions, and that's totally fine. I still think like the characters really resonated with me like the first game. I think the first game had, maybe this game does have it as well, but the first game had lots of multiple endings, and I did a few of those endings, and kind of I really enjoyed the resolutions a bit more with that first game than this game. Now, maybe I was just too tired to fully understand the resolutions of this game. I was pretty gone by the end, and like after 18 hours, and the last maybe 6 hours I did in quite a short space of time as well, I just felt a bit a bit burned on the whole format, and like I said, I think that's more me than the game, but still overall it's a really great game, and just still some incredible writing, and it's a great juxtaposition to talk about these two extremes, because these are the two extremes that Nbz loves in games, where you're either an action game where it's all about the movement and the game feel, or you're a narrative driven game, and if you're trying to do too many of something in between, it vibes less with you, Nbz. But when the game focuses on one of these things, it does well. And Citizen Sleeper 2 still narratively is just an incredibly strong game. But I also think the mechanics are very strong as well. Like, I think it was always fun to try and keep on top of those systems, and I don't know if I prefer it or not to the first game. I think I had a better experience overall with the first game, but I think it's that thing again where the second game's probably a better game, but the first game's far more impactful. I fall into that category a lot with sequels, but I was very pleased overall, just a bit tired.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I think, we often talk about, I feel like there's games and your feelings on them are influenced by so many factors. Part of it is expectation going in. Part of it is what you are feeling at the time, where you're at mentally, all that sort of stuff. Like Red Dead Redemption 2 is a great example of a game that I'm like, this game fucking sucks. But it's also because I was playing it at a time where I didn't have a lot of free time, and was like very frustrating how slow it was and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
I know that Dan Riker of Giant Bomb and Fire Escape has talked about this phenomenon of like reviewing a game and not being a fan of it, like Death Stranding, and then coming back to it years later and meeting on its own terms and like having a different experience with it. So I totally appreciate that. I will say that I think that it's not just you. The game is definitely more exhausting in its mechanical kind of approach, and
like the planet hopping is quite not it's stressful in and of itself, because you are being chased for most of the game, but you having to think about fuel on top of your food and all these other things feels a more stressful than the first game. There's more to manage, and
it's definitely deliberate, and I do really appreciate it. And I think overall, as a cohesive kind of statement from a narrative and mechanical perspective, I do think it's stronger. I do personally still prefer the original though, and I think part of that is just that location and the characters connected with me more, I think, over time. And I also like the less linear approach where you were able to, you could leave the station in various different ways if you wanted, or you could stay on the station. Like there were optional routes that you could take at the end that I really appreciated, and I liked saying no to certain ones and leaving the final one to the end, where I was like, I like these people, I'm going to go with these people. That felt more of my own stamp on it in a way. And Citizen Sleeper 2 feels like it's far more concerned with its singular, more linear narrative, and concluding that, which I think is totally cool, and there's some good stuff that happens at the end there. But I think overall I also do prefer the original, and for the most part I fall on the side of impact and originality over improved sequels.
Yes.
Which we can talk about that when it comes to Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, when we discuss our best games of all time, because there's a correct answer. Anyway, I think it's an excellent game overall, and very strongly recommend it. I recommend both games, so if you've not played either, start with the first. If you really vibed with it and enjoyed it, then play the second as well.
Is the first game still on Game Pass?
I don't think it is anymore, but it's been around for a long time now and has gone on sale quite cheaply recently. I think around when the second game launched, you could buy it for £5 on sale. So it goes on sale relatively frequently, so you can check it out. Great little game, great little series. Yeah. So
2 great games to start the year off that you should play.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. All right, let's talk about an old video game.
Another great game?
It's a video game. I think it's quite great.
Is this a game that is embedded within another Yakuza game?
No, it is a game embedded within another game, though, which is funny. So last year, there was a re-release of Sonic Generations that came out. Sonic Generations, I would say probably the best 3D Sonic that's ever been made, on a purely kind of like quality level.
Have you played many of them?
No, but like I think just looking at the Sonic franchise, it's not a hard assessment to make, if I'm gonna be honest. We played Adventure 2 on GameCube, Adventure 2 Battle.
I wanna play Magic Lamp at some point.
Magic Lamp.
What was the Wii one called?
Oh right, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Fuck the
with like
yeah.
Excite truck controls.
Yeah. It was like a runner basically. It was like a 3D,
wasn't that Magic Sonic and the Magic
Magic
Lantern?
something. Fucking, I don't remember. You look that up in the background. Anyway, that game, I remember that being advertised around the Wii's launch and being kind of excited for that, but never played it. There've been so many colors came out on that generation. There was Lost Worlds, that was a Wii U game with the Zelda costumes, right? Like there's been a lot of Sonics. Anyway, Sonic Generations. I played Sonic Generations. It was one of the first games I played.
Sorry, it was Sonic and the Secret Rings.
Secret Rings, there we go, yes. Changed names, I think, a bunch of times. Anyway, I played Sonic Generations on my very first PC back in 2013. I bought it in the first Steam sale in the summer of that year, which I believe was the summer that you and Ali T came to go to Thorpe Park. I bought a bunch of games there. Sonic Generations was one of them. And I played it, and I really...
Yeah, that was the year the podcast started, 2013.
Yes, it was. So, yeah, I played that over that summer, really enjoyed it, thought it was a solid, good, fun time. The kind of premise of Sonic Generations is it's 2D Sonic and 3D Sonic together. So there's levels that are each world, or each level, I'll call it level, because a level in Sonic has an Act 1, an Act 2, and a boss, right? That's generally the structure for Sonic games. So Act 1 was usually a 3D take on the level, Act 2 was a 2D take on the level, and then the boss was a boss which is usually in 3D or did some weird stuff. I thought it was very well made and put together. And then last year, they re-released it for everybody, but they added on a whole additional mini campaign. This very much feels like they copied Nintendo's homework. They were like, oh, Bowser's Fury, hey, that's interesting. How about we do a Shadow thing here? So it became Sonic X Shadow Generations, and the main menu has Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations, and you can pick between them, and they literally close the game and reopen it again with a different EXE. So they are actually quite separate. They're just like two options on a menu, essentially, that you choose.
That is weird.
It's very strange. But yeah, so you can play Shadow Generations, which is a new campaign built for this remaster, essentially.
You only played Shadow part?
Yes, I played like 10 minutes of Sonic Generations just to remind myself of Sonic Generations, and I was like, yep, this is what I remember. I don't need to play it. I've already played it. I don't need to replay.
Does Shadow have his motorbike and his gun?
No, you would love to see it, but I don't think that we ever get the gun on the motorbike.
Damn, but he's got his hover boots.
Well, okay, I'll get into it. There are power-ups that Shadow gets, but anyway, Shadow Generations, it's like a 3-ish hour campaign, so it's quite tight. And it's really good fun, ? Like, I think that in terms of 3D Sonic level design, what this does well is it has a sense of pace to it. It has that momentum and speed, and it has less of the frustrating stuff that Sonic always annoys me about, which is, I'm running really fast, I got hit by an enemy, I lose all my momentum, all my rings fly out of me, oh for fuck's sake, it just kind of ruined everything. And especially in the 3D stages, because there are weirdly 2D stages with Shadow in it, which is a strange thing, because like there would never, Shadow didn't exist when Sonic was 2D, but they're almost like kind of angled views as well sometimes, so it's like partial 3D, but it's also, you only have 2 dimensions to move between, so those ones are actually quite well done, but the 3D ones I thought were really cool, and they implement some like new mechanics. So basically, the hilarious thing as well is like there's a bunch of lore in here of like, you'll remember Sonic Adventure 2 Bally,
yes,
in which Shadow is a main character, and there's a whole story about him, and we never finished that game, but like I've seen a bunch of stuff online about it, and like there's the little girl Maria, and like he grows up with Maria, and then he was created by Gerald Robotnik, who is Eggman's dad, I want to say. So, like, you have a good scientist Robotnik with Maria. Anyway, they do, like, a whole backstory thing. You can watch a video before you play it of, like, catch up on Shadow's backstory. And so they tell you the plot of Adventure 2 Battle, but then they also tell you the plot of Shadow the Hedgehog, the game that came out on GameCube and during the PS2 era.
Where he did have a gun.
Where he had a gun and rode a motorcycle. But also, apparently, there was, like, a character called Black Doom, was the name of it. Anyway,
Okay.
Black Doom's like a weird alien, and he came from space, and there's a whole story here where apparently Black Doom was the one who actually gave Gerald Robotnik the ability to create the ultimate life form
name's
Shadow.
so great, Gerald Robotnik.
Yeah, it works really nicely. I believe Gerald Robotnik is also in the films, by the way, so they're carrying the lore over to that. So anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about story in a fucking Sonic the Hedgehog game, because I know like
Nbz loves a narrative-focused game or an action-focused game, and Shadow Generations is a narrative-focused game.
It is. It's 100. Yeah, it's all narrative. Yeah, definitely. But no, I look. It's there for the Sonic sickos. I appreciate them. I love that they're very into it. It's it's a thing. Anyway, you're kind of going through these levels, and the hub world looks similar to Sonic Generations, except it's in 3D, so you can kind of traverse it now and explore. And there's like some hidden secrets. You can unlock music tracks by like finding chests and stuff. But I think the main levels are all really good fun. Like they are well made and well thought out, and they keep a pace and momentum. There's different mechanics going on. So you get these abilities. One of them is you can kind of surf on water. One of them you turn into like a weird worm that goes through goo. So like he has transformations essentially. At the end you get like 2 black wings, like you're a fucking, I don't know, Sephiroth or something, and you're flying through the sky. Like there's some cool stuff they do in terms of like giving Shadow abilities. The thing that I didn't love about it was that you have the main levels, and those are great. You then have these like multiple mini challenges, which are like collect this number of rings and then get to the end, and they're basically like remixes of the levels you've already done with like little challenges applied to them, and they don't take too long. They're not that kind of significant, but getting to them requires navigating the world, the hub world, which isn't amazing, and every time that you kind of basically you only do have 2 kind of main levels at a time, and it feels like they didn't have enough content, right? They didn't have enough content to make multiple main levels, so they made you in between the main levels do the mini challenges, and you usually have to do like 4 of them, and then you have to get these keys, and you use the keys to unlock a thing, which then
even though it's
progresses.
a 3-hour game,
Even if it's a 3-hour game, it feels like it's padded, a little bit, yes, which is, you know, it's not great, but I thought that they were fun enough, you know, like it wasn't frustrating. It was just kind of like, oh, I really like that big long level. I'd like to do another one now. And it almost feels like a stop blocker there to be like, nope, you have to go do these mini challenges, then you'll get another level. So anyway, I enjoyed it. It was fun. So I don't have a lot more to say about it. I think it's quite pretty. It definitely, you know, is building on the Sonic Generations art style, but there's some cool stuff they do with it. I think the boss battles are maybe the highlight, actually. There's some really cool, big, bombastic boss fights, and they're all pretty unique. There's one where you're basically like surfing on water, and like you're spinning to hit barrels at this enemy who's in front of you, you know, like there's stuff which a little bit on rails about it that I thought was pretty cool. And you know, Shadow has his whole like chaos control ability, which you press one of the shoulder buttons and you freeze time essentially. So there's some levels where you can go through them and you get this ability, and you know, you have to freeze time to get through an area, or you can use it as a thing to make things easier for you to traverse areas. And you know, it's the classic kind of 3D Sonic thing, which is like enemies, you just lock onto them and you just ping, 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 and you just kill them in a row, which is quite satisfying. So yeah, it's, you know, it's not reinventing the playbook in any way, but I think as far as Sonic video games go, it's like good, which is basically like the second coming of Christ for Sonic fans.
Does it make you want to play the next 3D Sonic?
Not particularly. I think the reason is because they never build off of anything, right? They have an idea, they do it, and whether it's good or bad, they abandon it next time, and they're like, no, let's just go back to the drawing board and think of something brand new. And it's like, you're never going to progress if you just continue to act that way and make things like that, you know? So I never have faith in the next Sonic, because it's always back to the drawing board. They never build on ideas. They never iterate in a way that could...
I mean, arguably Mario and Zelda do that a lot as well, but in more positive ways. And I guess like Zelda, when Zelda does something well, they might... Well, you've got Galaxy 2, for example. You've got Tears of the Kingdom evolving on Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Like, there are things they learn and copy, and but all these games we're talking about are just far higher quality, I guess, is the biggest difference.
I think that's the point, is that like Mario and Zelda are of such consistently high quality that they don't need to do that, because they're always good.
Yeah.
Sonic is almost never good, and so in order to get to good, it feels like you have to find something that works and build on it to get to good. So
Is the best Sonic game better than the worst Zelda game?
Well, it depends what you're defining as worst Zelda game. Because if we're...
Well, let's not count CDI and let's not count spin-offs.
I was going to say, we can't talk about CDI games and that sort of stuff. I mean, what is the worst Zelda game? Zelda 2 for NES? Like, yeah, the best Sonic game is better. Like, I would rather play Shadow Generations than Zelda 2. So,
no,
yeah.
I would agree. No, you're right on that one.
Yeah. But that's not to say that, any of these games are
stops there.
incredible. So anyway, I'm sure I've angered half of our audience at this point because it's one of those things. I go on Steam and this game has overwhelmingly positive, and I'm like, wow, you've really just been deprived of like any quality that any shred of like breadcrumb that comes your way. You're like, this is God itself, And I'm like, okay, Sonic fans have really fucking gone through it, man.
But I mean, was the popularity of Sonic the character, or has it ever been the gameplay?
I mean, I think it has been the game. I mean, at its origin, it was the game, right?
Has it ever been the gameplay in a 3D setting?
For kids, yeah. Well, I mean, think about us, right? We grew up playing Adventure 2 Battle, and we were like, this game rules. It's awesome. We love it,
But like, did we actually think it ruled, or were we like...
I think we thought it ruled.
Cool because it's Sonic, and the only other thing we're comparing it to right now in this moment is like, I don't know, Mario Sunshine or something.
Well, it's that's fair.
I don't know. I'm being incredibly sour about Sonic right now.
No, I guess, but I do think that there are good Sonic video games that exist. It's just there's not many of them. You know how
there's like games on Steam that just try and copy other games.
Yeah,
infinitely. Like, are there many 3D Sonic likes?
That's a great question. I think they're starting to be.
You're someone who knows a lot about Steam.
Yeah, they're beginning to start to appear now.
I feel like there's a lot of 2D ones, like I was going to say Lonely Planet.
Freedom Planet, yeah.
Freedom Planet, yeah.
Yeah, there's some stuff out. I would say Lunistis as well, that little 3D platformer I played recently. Okay. They're starting to appear, I will say.
Interesting. Okay.
I think there will be more of them, but yeah. Anyway, let's just stop talking about Sonic. Otherwise, no one's gonna listen to us anymore.
Until our top 50 games of all time in episode 300.
No. Watch out, guys. We're gonna have lots of Sonic games on that list. It's gonna be great.
I miss Sonic Heroes.
My hot take: the best Sonic game was not made by a development team at Sega. It was made by the social media team because the murder of Sonic the Hedgehog is actually very good.
Oh yeah, you like that one? Yeah, that was cool.
I really think that game is very funny and well done. So, anyway. Great. I think that's going to do us. We'll never speak of Sonic again. Join us after the break where we'll talk about other things and other video games with your emails. We'll see you in a bit.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of today's show. As always, as usual, well sometimes, it's time for emails. If you would like to write an email into the show, please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. If you wouldn't like to write an email but you'd like to contact us another way, we also have a Discord server and there's a channel on that server called Emails. Join our community. It's a great old time over there and you can ask a question, a comment in that channel, so go check that out. Our first email this week is actually from Turtle, who was on Discord, who says, I have come to realize something about my digital versus physical library for the Switch. Games in the past that would come to Nintendo console I've sought out and bought physically, but games that would have been on handheld I have bought digitally. This, in a way, makes sense to save room on my system and also play one match aspect of some games. Xenoblade and Zelda being physical, while Pokemon, Monster Hunter, and Animal Crossing being examples of digital. However, where it is interesting is where I fell on certain franchises like Smash Bros. And Splatoon. I have both digital, even though they are, for the most part, seen as full, proper console-level games. An example of the opposite is Fire Emblem. I physically, even though it really fits the more handheld mold. My most interesting examples I have are 3D Mario and Zelda physically, while I have their 2D counterparts digitally. Metroid Dread digitally, and Mario Kart digitally. I have been a handheld gamer all my life, so something being a handheld game to me is not a knock on it, it's just interesting. My buying habits would indicate I see subconsciously 2D Zelda as handheld and 3DS Zelda as console. Do you see anything similar with your buying habits? And if so, what are some interesting examples of something that you thought was a console or handheld, but you bought in the opposite way? Along with that, do you think you subconsciously see the 2D versions of certain franchises as handheld while seeing the 3D as console? Sorry, this question turned out a lot wordier than I thought.
There we go.
It's quite a lot of methodology to Turtle's buying habits there. I don't think I'm quite as complicated as that.
Yeah, how do you kind of approach it, Valley? What's your kind of thought on this?
It's cheaper to buy physical on Amazon, so that's what I do.
Yeah.
it's kind of where I fall. There are a handful where a game has been on sale, like digitally on the eShop, and I think, I might as well buy it on there, and maybe a game that I might want to check in quite frequently, like when I eventually, after 6-7 years, bought Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, for example. Like I bought that digitally because it's quite a good game to play on.
Well, that was also a 33% off sale. Like Nintendo is like the deepest discount they ever do, and so you tend to get that infrequently on the eShop, at which point it makes sense to do it that way.
And it's also it's like the one game that Bally Jr. Plays a bit, or like I'm trying to help coach him through. So when you're setting up a game for a kid, you quickly learn you want to make it as simple a process as possible, and already having a game digitally on there makes it far more simple to access, along with like syncing up Switch controllers to like connect. It's a bit faffy. Genuinely, like this is something I really hope they fix with Switch 2, is that everything's just a bit snappier and quicker. It's actually a question from last time, but that's one aspect. I definitely agree with Turtle. I do see certain things as handheld, like 2D Metroid in my mind is handheld, even though arguably the first 2D Metroids, in Metroid 1 and 2 was actually on Game Boy, but then Super Metroid was console. They do, like, 2D games still feel handheld in a weird way. And I
think it's also the era we grew up in, right? Because it was very much like the start of the 3D era, which means there was a kind of hard delineation between PlayStation and N64 games, which looked 3D and were always 3D, versus Game Boy Advance games, which were always 2D, except for in weird circumstances where they tried to put like Doom on GBA and stuff like that, right? Where they were like, oh, it's pseudo 3D, but not really. I definitely have that similar kind of feeling in my brain of, okay.
But that's also reinforced by the big companies where 2D platformers, even though it's put out by Nintendo, are cheaper than 3D platformers, for example. Like, even though I see a 2D platform as a AAA game in the same way a 3D platform might be a AAA game, like Nintendo and other companies, and I would argue the commentariat on video games don't see 2D platformers as shiny as AAA for whatever reason, even though they can still have development teams that are equal in size and all these other things.
Right. And if you go back to like Game of the Year conversations around the era of the DS and 3DS,
it's horrendous.
Like, people don't even consider them for like major awards. Which,
even when you've got like Link Between Worlds and games like that.
Yeah, exactly. Which always struck me as very odd, because I tended to find handheld games are often my favorite video games, and so when everyone's like, "Oh, that's not a real game," I was just like, "That's stupid." Like, it feel like there was a priority that lent in the direction of fidelity more so than anything else. Which I feel like we've gotten away from at this point, and I think just the way the market has gone, the way indies are now in the same breadth, same conversation as big games, like, it's gotten a lot better on that front in terms of talking about.
I think Echoes of Wisdom, while it was talked about far less than the 3D Zelda, I still would argue Echoes of Wisdom was talked about more than Link Between Worlds when it came out, even though I might argue Link Between Worlds is the stronger game.
Yeah, even with the Link's Awakening remake, right? Just it being on Switch
made big waves.
elevated it a bit more. Despite, thinking like, that feels like a handheld
They are
game.
very much handheld energy games for sure.
Exactly. And so, I definitely have that view in my mind as well. Part of it is also like, I did play some Metroid Dread on a screen that wasn't handheld, but it always felt wrong using a Pro Controller to play Metroid Dread, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't know. Obviously, the game was built with analog control in mind. I've always been a D-pad person for 2D games, but I did play Metroid Dread with the analog stick because it was built around it. Yeah, exactly. Fucking God, this generation. But I felt I'm weird with this stuff. I prefer the Switch analog sticks to the Steam Deck analog sticks because I like small analog sticks rather than big analog sticks for whatever reason, just a personal preference.
Wait, on the Joy-Con themselves?
Yeah, I prefer those
insane.
far more. I like how
drift.
No, not with the drift, man. Just like how small they are, how tight
I love big analog sticks. My fingers are too big.
The small little kind of like analog sticks, I really like the Switch variation, and I think the Steam Deck ones are just way too fucking big and annoying. The throw on them is way too far.
It's massive. It's bigger than like, I don't know, PS5 controller.
Yeah, it's massive, and that for me, the throw on an analog stick for a 2D game makes it closer to a D-pad, which is why I prefer. I played Prince of Persia on Switch handheld, and that's a great example of a game that is made by a big company and big franchise and everything, but it's 2D, and I wanted it handheld, and so I did get it on Switch, and I played 90% of it handheld, and preferred it that way with the small analog stick on Switch. It was a similar situation. I didn't like the bigger analog stick on the Pro Controller because it just felt wrong for some reason. Like, I throw on an analog stick is a very specific feel for me, and the Steam Deck one just is way too fucking much. Like, I would like a Steam Deck Mini that was a little smaller with its analog sticks, and that would be ideal for me. But yes, I think that's kind of like where I come down on it when it comes down to the delineation between the handheld and console games. We talked about this on the transition between 3DS and Switch and Wii U and all that.
Yeah.
Of like, we're kind of losing handheld only games. But it more became like, well, indies kind of filled that space, and I think there are still some of those types of games that get made by Nintendo, but it's much rarer.
But
really.
I think you still got Metroid Dread, Echoes of Wisdom, Link's Awakening Remake. I think these are all handheld style games.
Yeah, you got a lot less of the weird experimental stuff though, right? Like there was, I feel like in the era of 3DS and DS, you would
not Roblox, Roblox.
Oh fuck! I would like to see the 3DS version of Roblox. My goodness, that sounds crazy. Yeah, exactly. The Pushmos and Box Boy. There was a Box Boy they did on Switch.
These have huge handheld 2D energy, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. And those don't quite exist in the same way. So, yeah, it's a bit of a shame. But, for me, digital versus physical is like, I live in a world where I would prefer to be digital for everything just because it's more convenient. I don't have to wait for things to arrive. Like, it's much better. And there was this beautiful golden period in 2019 where websites like Shop2 and these other websites, which is where I usually went to get my cheaper physical copies, were selling digital copies and undercutting the eShop by like 10 quid. And I was like, well, no brainer. I will never buy from anywhere else again.
They got found out hard by Nintendo, didn't they?
It was such a beautiful period though, back half of 2019, which I remember quite clearly as a period in time where a bunch of different games came out back to back.
Luigi's Mansion 3.
Luigi's Mansion, Link's Awakening, Astral Chain, like there was a string of games, and I own all of those games digitally because of this fucking going to Shop2 and just buying the digital version of it and then activating it on the eShop. Like, it was beautiful. It was great. And then Nintendo were like, you're not allowed to sell those anymore, which fucking sucks, and is really frustrating because it was like, I would have fully switched to digital at that point, you know?
And we should say, like, our understanding of the US market, for example, is that digital and physical are the same price, so it's no skin off your nose to buy one over the other, whereas for whatever reason, different markets, whatever, when it comes to big AAA first party, for me mainly it's like big Nintendo games and big Sony games. If I want to buy them day one and they cost 60 or 70 pounds, they're always like 5 quid, 10 quid cheaper on Amazon even than digitally, like every single time. And it's going to be a real shame because this feels like Switch 2 feels like the last console generation of physical hardware. Like knowing that the PS5 Pro is digital only makes you think that I'd be shocked if the next Xbox and PlayStation have a disc drive, or if they do, it'll be an add-on that you buy that we will probably not do. I don't know. I'd be on the fence maybe. I don't know. But my point is, I can see us going full digital at the end of the Switch 2 life cycle for sure.
Yeah, and it would suck because if prices don't change to be commensurate with that, then everything gets more expensive, and I would see myself buying a lot fewer games day one as a result of that. I think there's definitely scenario situations. This is kind of newsworthy. Nintendo are cancelling the gold point system, and they are also cancelling the voucher program. Two things which were great and really beneficial to consumers in the Switch generation.
It's like a permanent 5% off.
Yeah, exactly. And, no matter what, you would get money back and you would be able to reinvest that into another game. And it was a beautiful kind of synergistic system that, honestly, I think encouraged people to buy more games on the eShop. I certainly got things because I had gold points and was like, sure, I'll get this cheap thing because I have gold points to spend on it. And yeah, libraries grew as a result of that. I think it was very beneficial. Obviously, Nintendo are on top now, and I don't know, a bit of a whiff of arrogance being like, oh, we're going to take it away now so you don't get any deal anymore. Which sucks because, to be frank, it's probably not going to affect their bottom line that much. It's just, it was a very nice thing to do. The voucher program is a good example of something that I did use in certain scenarios when I wanted things digitally specifically. So Animal Crossing was a great example of a game where I was like, I don't want this physically because this is a game where I'm going to pop in for the next few months constantly. And if I want to play another game, I don't want to keep taking the Animal Crossing cartridge in and out, because you play Animal Crossing for your hour a day or whatever, you bounce out, you play something else. You don't want to be doing that. So Animal Crossing, I was like, I have to have this digitally. It makes the most sense. And so I did a voucher for that, I believe. So, you then have the additional voucher you can use for something else. And honestly, the pricing kind of situation in the UK worked out pretty much evenly. Like Switch games physically are usually about 42 quid here, and it's £84 for the two vouchers, so it was basically 42 quid. So you weren't saving money. It was still the same price to go physical or digital, but the voucher program at least allowed me, if I wanted to have a game specifically digitally, I was able to do that by using that. So yeah, there's certain games that like it makes sense to, right? And like, I think Smash Brothers is one that does make sense to. I know the email says, like, you wouldn't think it does, but it totally makes sense to for me, because it's a game you always want to have on your system. You never want to leave home without it just in case. And yeah, having it all there and easily accessible would be the ideal scenario. Splatoon as well. I think multiplayer games are a good example of games that you always want to have on a system, because you never know, like, when's it gonna be a thing that you could just pop out and play, with somebody coming over or whatever. It's just the convenience of having it there and not having to go and search through your collection and be like, oh fuck, I put the Triangle Strategy cartridge in the Mario and Rabbids case and like it's all mixed up, and that stuff can happen. So it's nice to have those games specifically digitally for that express purpose of multiplayer sessions. But yeah, I think the Steam Deck has spoiled me a little bit of like, I can go somewhere and have my Steam Deck and be like, I fancy playing this, and all you have to do is just download it and you have it on your system.
Yeah, when things are all digital, like Steam Deck, for example, that there is a nice luxury to that, and I can totally see why people go all digital. And I'm not someone who's going to massively miss physical when one day it does all become like that. But because of, like we've said, this whole price disparity thing in the UK, it has actually been kind of nice to build up a Switch physical library, and likewise PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 for me. Like, I do quite like having all those physical games now that I have them. Not that it was massively my choice to have them, but it just kind of happened. It's not the end of the world. It's quite nice having them, I guess. And
yeah, like I would say I will never be the person who has an entire room that is shelves of video games, but like I would like to have a space that is like, oh, here are my physical games. I keep them up here, and there's some amiibo there and whatever. Like having some statues and some games, like it's a nice, I would call it more a decorative thing than anything like any other reason to have physical. But I feel like I have enough physical games at this point in my life that where I don't in the future necessarily want physical to continue, because I can leave that in the past and have it as a decorative thing and then not have to really worry about it anymore.
Neither of us have ever bought a physical indie game when they've done like a
special edition
after the fact. Like there's a lot of people who's like, oh, I loved that indie game of, I don't know, say Celeste. I will make sure to buy the physical version of Celeste because that is one of my favorite games ever. We've never, even though Celeste is one of our favorite games ever,
right,
we've never had the desire to like, we have to own that physically. It's just,
yeah, I mean, like Ori's a great example, like one of my favorite games of all time. There's like beautiful collector's physical editions, and I'm like, that's cool. I like the video game, you know. Like, I don't know. It'd be very nice if someone for my birthday bought me like that. That would be a very nice present to give. But I wouldn't, of my own accord, ever buy it for myself.
No, I'm totally the same.
So,
but yeah, no, it's a good question, Turtle. It's kind of interesting to think about how we think about 2D versus 3D and how the Nintendo and other companies do as well. Our next email is from CMike1000 from Wales. Says, hi Bally and NBZ, with the Switch 2 on the horizon, now is a good time to look back over the Switch library and pick up those games which might have passed us by. What are the games which you think missed out on the limelight and everyone should pick up? I'm not talking about the blockbusters or the deep cuts, but those which fall in between, the shallow cuts? Also, one for Bally, with the lack of analog triggers, are Switch 2 owning racing fans doomed to endless Mario Kart? Thanks and keep up the good work. I'll now quickly do that racing one. It's a bit baffling that it's not been since the GameCube that Nintendo have had analog triggers. I don't know the power of the Switch 2, and I don't know. Obviously, it's interesting right now because a game like Forza Horizon is coming to PlayStation 5, so there's definitely the interest from Xbox to potentially have something like the Forza series on Switch 2. I don't know how keen on it Nintendo would be, and whether they would even consider. I just don't think Nintendo would think for a second of changing their hardware to accommodate third parties in that way. I'd love to think that they would, but I'm very confident the Switch 2 will not have analog triggers, and as a result, will Forza Horizon ever come to Switch 2? I think there's a decent chance it will. I think it'll just utilize the triggers in the same way other games. Like I played Need for Speed Underground or something, one of the Need for Speed games back on the Wii U, and it was non-analog triggers, and it was just click in for accelerate, release for not accelerate. And I think unfortunately that's probably what Switch 2 will game for a game like Horizon. So yeah, it's a shame, and I think for me, it doesn't bother me a ton personally because I will always probably play Forza Horizon on Xbox, or one day if I don't own an Xbox, probably on PlayStation or something. So it doesn't bother me a ton personally, but I think it would be a real shame if there's a very niche group of racing fans who can't get access to those games on Switch. But I think the vast majority of racing fans own other consoles to play these games on. So I really think this is a very small issue, but it is an annoying one nonetheless.
Yeah, I can imagine, like, with all the stuff they pack into a Joy-Con. Obviously, these ones are bigger, so there's potentially more room for them to get analog triggers to work. But there's, the real estate already on a Joy-Con is so cramped. And, like, I would say the bumpers are one of the thinnest buttons that has ever been on a controller, right? Like, they are there's so little real estate there to press those, and it looks like Switch 2 is pretty similar in terms of form factor.
Yeah, and that form factor is kind of for handheld reasons, I imagine, also, and like fitting inside of cases and this kind of thing. So I'd be very surprised if they had analog triggers. Sorry. Can I mention one of my favorite uses of analog triggers ever?
Oh, sure, yeah.
And this is something I think 99% of games could benefit from. Is Smuggler's Run on the GameCube.
Oh, okay.
You could hold in L2 and you could fade in and fade out the map based on how much you pressed in the analog trigger. So you can view your vehicle that you're driving in real time in front of you. But if you're like, oh, which point was I trying to get to? I'll just fade in the map over the entire screen. But I'll only fade it in enough where I can see the map at the same time as watching my vehicle drive around live. I think for open world games, driving open world games, any game that requires a map, just the ability to drag in a map and fade it in and out is amazing. Because if you are pausing a game to check a map, you are not running. And if you're focusing on running, you can't always look at a map. So the ability to do two at once was awesome, and I would love stuff like that. Anyway.
Yeah, I believe Xenoblade 3 has this functionality as well. It doesn't use the analog trigger, but you can have a faded map over the top of gameplay, so you can simultaneously see where the map is leading you at a kind of macro level, but also run around,
exactly.
which is very nice to have. So,
shallow cuts.
Yeah, I like this phrase. This is fun. It depends on how we define it. So it seems like the email has defined it as not blockbusters or deep cuts, those that are kind of in the middle. So I thought about this from my perspective as games that probably were quite well marketed and people knew about, but like haven't really been talked about since they came out. And not that they're forgotten, but they wouldn't be the first games you'd go to when you're recommending games on a Switch, you know?
Yeah.
And they wouldn't also be a thing that only you have played and exists as a weird indie on the eShop and nobody knows about, basically. So I still kept in the realm of like
mine. Some of mine might fall into that category, but yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, it depends on how you go with it. But generally, mine are games you will have heard of and are probably quite well known. But are more shallow cuts as we're talking about. So Bally, do you want to go ahead and start us off?
So this game didn't feature in like my top 10, but I was very excited for it and had a really good time. And that game is New Pokemon Snap.
It's a good one.
It's not in the top tier of thing. It is categorically a Pokemon spin-off. I don't think the marketing was through the roof for this game, and I think there's definitely a lot of people who will enjoy the Pokemon universe who would enjoy this game. This game delivered on the vibes and feel of the N64 Pokemon Snap. And for people who think that the original Pokemon Snap on N64 was maybe a bit simple, this game doesn't add a ton more to that formula, and that's that's a debatable criticism. Not something I personally had an issue with the game on. I love how simple the original Pokemon Snap was, and I loved how simple this sequel was, and it had been a damn long time. I would recommend New Pokemon Snap.
Yeah, I was one I was going to put on the list, but I didn't like the game, so I wouldn't call it. I wouldn't call it a cut, just because I didn't really connect with it. I think it's a really fascinating and a great example of this, because the amount of fervor, the amount of people being like, "Where's a new Pokemon Snap? Nintendo, fucking get the Pokemon Company to do a new Pokemon Snap. Everyone will buy it." And then it came out and people were like, "Oh, that's cool," and nobody has talked about it since. Anytime you think about people talk about the best Switch games, nobody brings up Pokemon Snap. Everyone forgets it exists. It's kind of wild how it just fell out of the collective memory. But it's there, it exists, and people got what they were asking for, which is a new Pokemon Snap. It's just, I don't think it ever really hit with people, in a significant way.
Yeah.
That's a really good one.
List.
Let's bounce back and forth maybe.
So,
I think the definition, the very embodiment of a shallow cut is Astral Chain. I think Astral Chain is a great example of a game that is really good, really fantastic. Gets talked about by some people in some circles, but is often kind of forgotten about as a really high quality game that's an exclusive, in fact, as well. Never went to any other system. One of the best examples of an exclusive on Switch in terms of it was so built for the system and its power level that playing this game in handheld is fucking mind-blowing. It was one of the best plain game experiences I've ever had, because it truly felt like playing a proper full-blown console action game on this tiny screen, and fluid 60 frames per second, looked fantastic, really great engaging audio and music. I had headphones in, flying I think to America. I think that was for Ali T's wedding that year, 2019.
Before you went 4 times a year, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Before I lived in America, in LA, my favorite state, my favorite country. So yes, I remember playing this on the plane to America and being absorbed the whole time, and 3 or 4 hours just flew by because I was just in Astral Chain and the cutscenes and the action. And it's a great game. It's really, really good fun. And I think it is one that doesn't necessarily get the recognition. And it's not astonishing. It's not a 9 out of 10, but I think it's a solid 8, and I had a great time with it, and very much recommend if you're thinking about what did I miss on Switch, what have I not picked up yet before the new system comes along, which this very much happened to me with 3DS, and I'm I've got to hoover up some of these 3DS games that passed me by. Astral Chain should really be on the top of anybody's list, I would say. And obviously it's genre dependent. If you're not huge into character action stuff, then fair enough. But if you have any kind of interest in that at all, or even just like good vibes and music, like I'd say part of Astral Chain's charm is that it's not just a full-blown action game. There's sections of like running around the city doing like kind of menial tasks, police work. Of like, my favorite thing in the game was collecting trash cans and throwing them in the bin, you know. That was very, very fun. And then there's like these little side quests of like, this person wants an ice cream, and you have to like carry this ice cream across like a busy walkway without dropping it and messing it up. Like, there's some goofy fun stuff in there that I think people would really enjoy. So yeah, I think Astral Chain's a great one for this list.
Nice. I'm going to say one that is not a shallow cut, but links to a shallow cut. So I would say the Octopath Traveler games are definitely worth checking out. I don't think they're a shallow cut.
I had Octopath 2 on my list as a shallow cut. I do think that Octopath 2, because it's a sequel and didn't get as much marketing or limelight as the first, because the first was like a launch-ish game. It was announced in the February... Yeah. Well, sorry, the January event in 2017, the original Octopath Traveler was announced, and so it had a lot of spotlight on it, and it was an okay game that, you know, never delivered on the promise fully. Octopath 2 is like a really fucking good game that didn't get as much traction as it should have done. So.
Yeah, no, totally, and you're right. More people need to play that game. I don't argue the first game as well, but I know you don't like that game.
No,
but I think its little brother, and probably the game that came before Octopath but got remade, and I think arguably in many ways it inspired many aspects of Octopath, is Live Alive. Like,
yeah, I also have this on the list as well.
Yeah, I think that game, as someone, I played that game between the two Octopath games, and it does so many cool things that Octopath does. If you want that, like, let's play lots of smaller stories that actually do link towards a wider story, big story, then Live Alive is like a great like JRPG remake that I would highly recommend on the Nintendo Switch. Like, I had so much fun with that game.
Yeah, I would also kind of just finish out the trilogy here, because I would also put Triangle Strategy on a shallow cut list.
That's just one I never got to, but would like to get to.
Exactly, yeah. It is one that, like,
the definition of a shallow cut.
yeah. You just didn't quite get there, but it's fantastic. Like, it's my favorite of the HD 2D games. Like, I put 50 hours into it in a very short space of time. And then I wanted to start it again to do different choices. And Jesus. I never do that. Wow. I never do that. But I did restart it, and I was like... And I never actually got that far in my second playthrough.
You know, that game came out in VR.
It did, yeah. Fucking crazy. And it has, like, a whole, like, different user interface and everything. Like, yeah, that's mental. But, yeah, Triangle Strategy is really... Like, it's a nerdy-ass tactics game, man. Like, it's fucking difficult, and
I found the demo so challenging.
It's so really hard. And if you found that hard, like, the full game is going to just knock your fucking socks off. It's so brutal. But you have to stop playing it like a Fire Emblem, where you're like, oh, that person died, I have to restart. That's not how you should play this game. Like, there were multiple maps where everyone died and I had one person left, and I was scrapping and scrounging to finish the map with that last remaining survivor. That's kind of what the beauty of that game is like, it's going to kick your teeth in, and you're going to have to really kind of get your head around it, because it's some wild stuff. And yeah, it has so many different story choices and maps and everything depending on the choices you make. There's so much stuff in that game, and very, very replayable as well. So yeah, I think all those games, the HD 2D variety, are in some way or another shallow cuts. I definitely think Live Alive and Triangle Strategy fit better overall on that list, just because they are less talked about than Octopath and even Dragon Quest, right? Because that's like a big name.
Yeah,
so
yeah. Mine are now kind of indie games, but I think they're worth shouting out. Classic of TNL that not enough people talk about is Eastward.
Of course, the number one for me from an indie game perspective. Yeah.
If like, I think I said this when I was playing. What game was I playing? And I said, "You think this game's got Earthbound vibes? You need to play Eastward instead." I can't. What game was I playing? I tweeted this on Blue Sky. I posted it on Blue Sky recently.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I've completely forgotten. There was some game I was playing, and it was like, oh, everyone thinks that this game has loads of Earthbound vibes. In reality, the game that I've played... Oh, everyone thinks that... what's the really short RPG that's got an insane number of things about it online? Undertale.
Things about... Undertale, sure,
everyone thinks that Undertale is the biggest analog of Earthbound, and I would argue, having played Undertale, Eastward is a far better analog or close representation of Earthbound than Undertale is. Like Eastward, I think, is just gets the vibes of that game so much more. Even though it's not even a JRPG, it's like an action Zelda kind of style game.
I think if we're talking like atmosphere, like it is almost 1-to-1, you know.
Massively. It was our game of the year, I think, for 2019, 21.
I think it is like the small game that never got any awards recognition or nobody really talked about it, and we're here screaming about it, being like, why does nobody love this like we do, you know?
Yes, yeah. And I think it's a Taiwanese studio as well, so like it's just impeccable pixel art. I really love the story. I actually really love like the dungeon design and stuff like that. I think it's
like there's a brothers kind of feel to it of controlling two separate characters doing different things to like single player co-op puzzles, right?
And we were really sold on it from the trailer, and I feel like the original reveal trailers didn't make as much of an impact with other people as us, and then when the game finally came along, predictably it didn't make as much impact as we thought it should, but then we picked up the game, we loved it. I think it did pretty well critically, not amazing.
It's done, critically it did okay. It's one of those examples of, hey, the Steam audience were correct because it has lots of reviews on Steam, like a huge number. So the game has been very financially successful. That's good.
That is good. So yeah, I'd love to see. I mean, they did release Octopia, but I'd love to see where that team go next.
That's definitely the most disappointing part of this is Octopia. Just ignore Octopia. You don't need to play it, basically. It's unfortunate. I think it was a cool idea that ultimately never bore fruit because they just didn't really understand what made a good farming game tick. But anyway, the base game, Eastward itself, is well worth the price. So highly recommend that for sure. I think definitely as a sub-series, it's kind of cult classic-y, but I want to specifically call out the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, which is the double collection of the games that came out on 3DS, which only came out in Japan, Ace Attorney Chronicles, and those were essentially games set in a older period of history, Japanese period of history, that are really good starting points, I would say, for Phoenix Wright as a series, and I think are just excellent as a whole. Like, you play it all the way through from beginning to end, it will tell a cohesive, complete narrative with loads of twists and turns, excellent music, some of the best music in the Ace Attorney franchise, and beautiful in terms of its visual design. This comes from the 3DS era in terms of they were moving towards a 3D kind of aesthetic for the games instead of the kind of hand-drawn or pixel art stuff they'd done before, and it translates so wonderfully on Switch. I think this is, you know, if you've heard stuff about Ace Attorney and you've always been like, oh, I wonder if I should give those games a shot, I almost would say start here over the original Phoenix Wright, because you will get a complete arc of a story that is super satisfying, and more modern in its design as well, because it has, you know, the features that came with iteration, and, you know, all the kind of investigation stuff is more fluid. And also, I'd say it's much faster to get into in terms of the first case is a lot smoother, and the second case is also slightly different from a traditional one. So the onboarding into it is a lot more streamlined. So, yeah, the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles is highly recommended.
Nice. Another indie from me that we've also shouted a lot about is Mech Extermination Force.
Yes, absolutely.
So Bertel Holberg obviously made Gum and Clive on 3DS. We very much like that game. I think Mech Extermination Force is his best game, and he's had a couple of weaker games, I would argue, since. This game is just, if you like action platforming, this is just boss battles in action platforming. If you like Mega Man or Metroid or the or boss fights in those games, or even like Cuphead, this is just like boss battles, platforming, shooting galore.
It's kind of, I would call it like Contra Cuphead almost.
Contra Cuphead, yeah, massively. And again, didn't make waves at the time. This game's maybe arguably closer to Deep Cut. But
yeah, I might call it a Deep Cut personally, just because nobody else knows about it.
It's very, very good. Would highly recommend.
Great. Here's a game I haven't finished, but I think is a good shallow cut. I don't know. I just need to get back to it because it's actually really good. I've been enjoying it a great deal. Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon is fantastic. Like, again, like it has Big Brother's A Tale of Two Sons energy, where you control young Bayonetta Cereza with one analog stick, and you control her big monster with the other, and you basically do like a fun little Zelda adventure, doing co-op puzzles together, exploring the world. Really wonderful storytelling and voice acting. A lot of Scottish voice acting, Bally, so you know you got to get on this one. And yeah, really well made, beautiful little game that I need to finish, you know. And I don't know why I stopped it. I just I started it last year around GDC times, around March, and then I just haven't got back to it since then. So I do need to get back and finish it off. But it's definitely the definition of a game of like, if I hadn't have played it and I didn't own it yet, it would be the first on my list to pick up in like before Switch 2 comes out, basically, or like once Switch games start getting hard to get, or you know, that sort of thing. That's high on my list because it's a high quality title that was well reviewed, that I was always interested in as well, and I think it's definitely one that I would recommend to you, Bally, as someone who doesn't love Bayonetta games, but you know, this is the franchise doing something different that is more up your alley in terms of gameplay style. Nice. So it's very, very good, and I need to finish it, so it's my reminder to myself to go and do that.
My next one is actually a DLC. I just don't think this made enough waves for the quality and how much we enjoyed this game, and that is Cuphead: The Delicious Last Course. Obviously Cuphead is top tier, definitely not a shallow cut, not a deep cut. It is not even a cut. It's one of the best games on Switch.
It's a blockbuster.
It's a blockbuster. Yeah. The Delicious Last Course is equally, if not better, than the main game, and people need to play it. And I feel like DLC, categorically, by definition, unless you're Elden Ring, never makes as many waves.
I feel like DLC is the definition of shallow cut, especially DLC for big games. True. Like, I never played the Icky Island expansion for Ghost of Tsushima. That feels like a shallow cut to me.
Yeah, totally. So I really, really, really recommend the Delicious Last Course. It's not just boss fights. There's also like these kind of chess piece style levels that are all themed around different chess pieces that I also thought were just amazing. People need to play that game.
Yeah, for sure. It reminded me, basically, I went back to my 2017 Game of the Year list and I was like, wow, I put Cuphead as number 2, like above Mario Odyssey. I was like, did I make the right choice doing that? And I played the Delicious Last Course and I was like, no, everything is worse than Cuphead. This game is fucking impeccable. Like, I was correct to put it as my number 2 game that year. So, it bolstered my confidence in how good of a game Cuphead is because it's so fucking good.
It is so good.
Yeah. Cool. I don't have that many left. Paranormasight is a good one, which obviously is a visual novel with a bit of a horror vibe to it that I pushed through because I was really into the narrative of it, and I think it was really, really good. A game that was made by Square Enix, barely even publicized by them. They really didn't market this game at all, and you know, from a big company publishing lots of different stuff, and I think Square Enix has kind of changed their tune now. They're only going to publish big stuff at this point, but there's so many little Square Enix games like Harvestella or like there were so many like random RPGs they made, Various Day Life, and like all these games with nonsense names that nobody played. Paranormasight is an example of a random Square Enix published game and actually developed game that was fantastic and didn't get any limelight at all. Nobody talked about it. Like, it definitely feels like one of those that would get forgotten about otherwise and nobody would have mentioned it. So I definitely want to put that onto people's radars and say, as a scaredy cat, as someone who we've talked multiple times about getting scared by horror, I was able to push through Paranormasight. Even if it did have the jump scares, it was worth it because the story being told was super compelling and like did really cool stuff from like a meta narrative perspective as well. Like really, really cool stuff. So strongly recommend that game. Any more, Bally, from you?
Yeah, just a couple of very quickly. This is probably also a deep cut, but The Last Campfire from
nice,
from Hello
yeah.
Games. It's just a really like Nintendo energy charming little puzzle game that I really enjoyed. I think its level of difficulty was pretty perfect for me, not overly challenging, and this game didn't make a single wave, I feel like, when it came out.
No.
And I think it's really charming and worth giving a shot. And then very quickly, another one, that's a game that me and Caroline enjoyed a lot, and we kind of went back and forth trying to beat each other's high scores, is Mini Motorways. It's decent on Switch, but you can probably have just as much on like an iPad or something with a better touchscreen than a Switch. And yeah, it's like a city builder, but you're building roads, motorways, and it's all about efficiency, and it's very satisfying. Just kind of let's just use that part of my brain, click around roads and things while listening to a podcast or something. It's a cool little game.
Nice. My last one is a first-party Nintendo game, but it was probably the only first-party Nintendo game you could call a deep cut. But I'm going to put it here because I think it's impossible to be a deep cut if you're a first-party Nintendo game. So my final shallow cut is Sushi Striker, Way of the Sushido, a game that I always bring up at any opportunity because it's just like, it's really fun. Like, I enjoyed it a lot, and to be honest with you, like, it probably didn't need to last like 8 or 10 hours or however long it was, because it fundamentally is just the same mechanic for that length of time, but it's a really satisfying kind of weird puzzle game where you're like chaining plates together and pausing time and throwing plates at your opponent. Like, it's such a goofy, weird game with such an interesting energy, and like has full-blown cutscenes. Like, the amount of budget that went into this game is insane. Like, voice acted, funny, weird cutscenes that just like don't feel like anything Nintendo would ever do, and I think that you can probably find it quite cheap. I think it's a weird experience. It exists on 3DS as well, because it came out in that weird crossover period where they announced the 3DS version, but then they put it out on Switch as well, because otherwise it was going to die. And to be fair, it probably died either way, because like nobody bought this game. But you know, I got it a couple of years later for like 10 quid, super cheap, and I had a blast with Sushi Strike. I just think it's an extremely stupid video game that is really mechanically fun, and very much worth people seeking out. So if only just to see those cutscenes. I think they're just very goofy. So Sushi Striker, Way of the Sushido, probably the most shallow cut of them all, if we are really thinking about it. So there you go. Good
Nice.
Stuff.
Good question. Thank you very much for that one.
Yeah, very much like that new designation. And I don't know, is there any games on Switch that you hadn't picked up, Bally, that you're like looking at in the future of like, oh, I'd like to get that at some point? I know you're generally not the person who does this. I'm much more the person who does this. Because for me, like the Another Code remake is a good example of that.
Oh, yeah.
I really want to check that out. I don't think I would buy Endless Ocean, only if it was like £5, because apparently it's bad.
Yeah.
But like, as a thing, as like a first party, like we're doing Endless Ocean again, I was like, yeah, I should probably figure out what that thing is like at some point, because no one else has talked about it or bought it. So yeah,
I definitely want to play Triangle Strategy at some point. Games like Paper Mario 1000 Year Door from last year, I want to play remakes like that, and there's a bunch of indies I need to get to that are all obviously on Switch, but are they really shallow cuts? I'm not sure. But
yeah, I guess it doesn't have to be a shallow cut, but just anything that you didn't get to on Switch that you might.
I'm thinking games like Pokemon Legends Arceus. I'm still really curious.
Yeah,
about.
That's a good one.
Even Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I'm interested in. I'm looking at my master document of like video game substitutes from previous years that I never got to. That if time was of no object, I would ideally play.
You would try them out, yeah.
Yeah, and then games like. Well, we're going to get to Super Mario RPG. Very keen on playing that.
Mm-hmm.
Metroid Prime Remaster, I need to play.
Yeah, it'd be good for you to revisit it.
Yeah. And then there's like, I'd say fairly deep cut from last year that no one talked about, but Tim Geddes was like very keen on. There's a 3D platformer / 2D Nico Dorico.
Yes.
I'd like to play that game. So, but maybe not on Switch or Switch 2 or Steam Deck. We'll see. Yeah,
we'll see. Great. Well, that is going to do us for this episode. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. You, of course, can be alongside these fine folks and send emails to us. Bally, where would they send those emails to?
Please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Excellent. Feel free to let us know your thoughts on various things and ask us questions, and we might read them on a show like this one. Obviously, you can find the show in various places, and you can support the show across the internet by going to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where we would like to thank some folks who have been supporting the show.
Yes, we have a brand new patron. Thank you so much for your support, Lee H. But thank you also to our $10 tier plus patrons. They are Zach S., Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer UK, Alan, Turtle, Orange Thunder, and Ali T. Thank you all for your $10 tier plus support, but also thank you to all of our other patrons. It's hugely appreciated, all the support you give to the show. We recently did our February episode of This NintendoLife, where we talk about everything Nintendo, and we did some predictions for 2025. We even went through our predictions for the 6 nominations at the Game Awards for Game of the Year, which was a fun thing to do and look ahead to. And one prediction of Nbz in particular I was very keen on, that it would fit my lifestyle quite nicely, so definitely check out that episode for a single $1.
Yeah, go ahead and do that. That'd be great. Obviously, you can find the show in various places across the internet. We're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher. You can download us on any podcasting app that you may have, and you can review us on there as well, and that'd be highly appreciated. Go give us a rating on there. That would help the show get out to more people. And also, you can just recommend it to people in your life if you know them. You're like, hey, you like Nintendo, listen to these people, they can talk about it a little bit, I guess. That's good. So that would be nice also. And yeah, you can also follow us on various platforms. You can find me if you just search for Nbz or Lord Nbz on any social media. I'll pop up. You'll find me there. Bally, where can they find you?
I am at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91 on Twitter and Blue Sky.
Great. You can also find the podcast as well at TNL Podcast. And yeah, we put updates about the show and stuff on there. So you
go follow us on Blue Sky. We are growing the show.
Yeah, more people are moving over there now. I'm not fully off of Twitter yet, but it's trending in that direction. So I'm sure we'll get there eventually.
I've decided to. So I have kind of 3 initial loves on Twitter. They are video games, politics. I'm falling out of love with politics. And
who's in love with politics? My God, these days.
The other key pillar is rugby. So I have decided to start following rugby people on my gaming Blue Sky. So it is a combination of rugby and video games, and I'm probably going to move away from following politics on social media, which is probably healthy.
Also, I love how it's not like, it's not games, politics, and sports. No, it's games, politics, and specifically rugby.
Yeah, specifically rugby, yeah. Because when you have more than one kid, there's no chance. I'm quite a hobby-rich person, as people can probably guess, knowing that I've been doing this podcast for a big chunk of my life. But yeah, if I couldn't choose to follow another sport if I tried, it has to just be one, and that sport is rugby.
You got to lock in at some point. So. Wonderful. Well, that's going to do us for this episode of the podcast. We'll be back in like 2 weeks' time, something like that. Talk about some video games, something like that.
I'm going to start 9 Souls.
Oh man,
that's probably a shallow cut from last year.
Probably, yeah. I definitely want to play that as well. But most of my time is going to go to my boy Majima. I'm a pirate yakuza in Hawaii. I'm going to have a great time this week. That's all I'm going to do this weekend. I think I'm just going to play the pirate yakuza in Hawaii and have a grand old time doing that. So great. That will do us. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back soon. Until then, bye bye. The musical interlude used on today's show was Boss Battle Neo Devil Doom, aka All Hail Shadow, by Crush 40 from Sonic X Shadow Generations. Copyright Sega, Sonic Team, all those fucking people, 2024.